Hi, good afternoon. Today I wanted to make a video discussing Tania Head in light of the fact that the 21st anniversary of the September 11th attacks is vastly approaching. For those who don't know, if this was before your time, this unfortunately happened back in 2001. I was 14 years old at the time, and luckily myself and my friends and my family, we didn't know anyone who died or got injured. Although I know two people who were there, but who luckily made it out. So we were very grateful for that. One of them was my friend's father, and one is a close family friend who's sort of like an uncle to me. They both witnessed it, they were both there. My friend's father had a worse experience, but luckily he came out physically unscathed. So I'm grateful that both of those men were, for the most part, okay. I mean, emotionally, they were a little messed up for a while, obviously. But in light of that, I did want to go over this woman who made claims to be there when she was not. So today, the discussion is going to be on Tania Head. So Tania was born Alicia Esteve Head, and she was born in July 1973. Her real name was not Tania, obviously. This woman had, I guess you would call, a case of pathological lying. She would come up with all sorts of crazy stories to gain attention and sympathy, I guess, because she had a low self-esteem and she was angry at how her life had turned out, possibly. And it's a shame because she grew up wealthy. She's from Barcelona, Spain, and her family didn't struggle financially, although they were very greedy. It's reported that her brother and her dad had gotten caught up in a scheme where I believe that they took money from investors. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's just what I heard, that they were arrested for this and possibly sent to prison for it. She went to Swiss finishing schools. She had a pretty good childhood in terms of finances. Obviously, it couldn't have been good if she was so emotionally messed up. Or it could just be that she was just an insecure person. I don't want to accuse her parents of being negligent and abusive if they weren't. Obviously, her dad is a piece of work if he stole all this money, but that doesn't mean that he was bad to his children. There's no real understanding of why Miss Head was like this. There could be numerable reasons. So something to note that's interesting is that Tania had said that she survived these attacks, which occurred in September 2001. However, she didn't ever live in the United States until 2003. And she had come across the Survivors Network, which was a support group. A man who actually survived the catastrophe named Jerry Bogarts, I think that's his name, or Bogatz, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, so I apologize. He was a survivor, and he also initiated this support group for people who were there, or people who may have lost loved ones or colleagues or friends there, and they needed an outpouring of support. Because sometimes, unfortunately, when you talk to people that didn't experience this kind of trauma, they don't always understand what it is that you're going through, and even if they listen, there's always a chance that eventually they're going to either run out of supportive things to say, validating your feelings, and that's actually really important, especially for such a catastrophe as this. So he created this support group to help people who were in the same situation as himself. And that's where Alicia, who went by Tania by this point, had discovered the Survivors Network, and she came up with this elaborate story that I'm going to relate to you guys now. So despite the fact that Alicia had never been living in the United States before '03, and the attacks had occurred 2 years prior to that, she still went to the support group and she told people that she was in the South Tower, which was World Trade Center 2, and that she was there when Flight 175 had hit into the building. And she said that she was on the 78th floor. And she also said that she worked in banking, I believe in global investments. And so this is what she was telling people. And the worst part of it was she said that her husband, well, it also switched between her husband and her fiance, a man named Dave. She said that he was in the first tower and that he died. in the attack, because remember, both of these buildings were hit almost simultaneously, maybe like 10 minutes apart. So she says that her husband was in the first tower, she was in the second. How ironic. He was killed, and she says that she received burns and sustained a really serious injury to her arm. And as time went on and she kept reiterating the story, and she showed people scars from a previous injury that still hasn't been claimed, explained how it actually happened, because obviously she wasn't there. I don't know what happened to her arm. I don't think anyone knows, because this woman lies so frequently. I don't even think she knows anymore. Anyway, Alicia, as Tania, was telling people that the injuries to her arm were sustained in this attack. And then as time went on, she also started adding to the story. She said that a man named Wells Crowther had saved her, that he put out a fire on her back and guided her to safety somehow, even though they were on the 78th floor and he died. I don't know how he guided her to safety if the elevators were out of commission, and it would have taken over an hour to get down 78 flights. That's just what she said, and people took her for her word. She also said that she had witnessed people that were dead or dying, lying all over the floor, as to be expected. But she also said that one of the men that were there had given her his wedding band and asked her to give it to his wife, and she did. But I don't know how she found this woman. Well, I mean, obviously it's a lie, but these are just questions that I would have asked. I don't know how she would have found this woman, especially because she said that she was in a coma for like 8 days after the incident. After she got out, she woke up in a hospital like a week later. So if you don't remember how you ended up down 78 flights, how do you remember to return this ring and to whom it belongs to? So these are questions that I would have asked. I mean, you can say I'm insensitive, but I don't trust people at their word. I don't feel like I should. And here's a classic reason why. Paranoia be damned. That's just how it is. People will say anything in order to garner sympathy, and they will victimize people in any way that they can. And I'm not sure why, although a lot of it must stem from insecurity and low self value. So, anyway, this woman goes around and tells people this wild tale about her fiance dying, and it turned out that the man that she was claiming to be her fiance was a real victim. And I will get into that because that's a whole other disaster. So, because Tania had become so popular and so well known within the Survivors Network, she ended up being allowed to give tours at the memorial and the museum that went up. And because of that, back in '05, when they had the tribute center, it was a visitor center in tribute to this disaster. She met with the mayor, she met with the previous mayor, she met with other dignitaries within the New York state government. So she met with Michael Bloomberg, she met with George Pataki, who was the governor at the time, and she also met with Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani, yeah, that guy. She met up with him, and he was mayor at the time that this horrible incident occurred. It's reported that the day that she did the first tribute center walkthrough, because she was the first person to ever give a tour, um, news reporters had noticed that she wasn't trying to jump in front of the camera and get a lot of attention, but they were also saying that, you know, she was able to express her story, and she gave it with such detail and such conviction that people believed it. You know, why would anyone lie about this, right? No one would sit there and think to themselves, well, this lunatic came from Europe all the way over here just to give a story pertaining to something she had nothing to do with. So that's what happened with her. And then over the years, her story started not adding up. So I'm from New York, and the New York Times is possibly one of the most dignified newspapers in our city, in our state, and possibly within the country. I mean, I know that people even order the New York Times who live all the way across the country from us, and they will still want this paper, a subscription to it. If they cannot have it delivered, then they will look it up online. You know, they'll have an account and a yearly subscription rate that they pay, because this paper has so much class and refinement and dignity. And at the time, New York Times reporters had discussed survivors who had lived even though they were at the point of or above impact. So remember, that was the 78th floor. So anyone who survived at the 78th floor or higher, despite it being within or above the impact zone, they already had interviewed all these people. They wanted to make it into, I guess, an encouragement piece. And so when Tanya had started making these claims, even though it took years later, I believe it was '07 that her claims started getting disputed. So we're looking at 6 years after the incident and 4 years after she started saying that she was there. They started noticing, well, hey, we never interviewed this woman. We've never spoken to her. So what is it that she's talking about? So Tanya was telling people that her fiance or her husband, depending on which one you heard from her, because she always had some story. She said that her husband was named David Suarez, and when that came to light, his family had no idea who she was. As far as they knew, he and Tanya had never met, and also as far as they knew, they were definitely not engaged. And there were other people that were coming forward to dispute these claims. And then the New York Times was following up on an article that was written years before because, as far as they knew, they interviewed everyone who had survived above the impact zone of the airline crashing into the buildings. So Tanya's story started to unravel, and as it fell apart, the reporters began contacting people that she was affiliated with, her friends, people at the network, even Wells Crowther's parents. I remember I read about that. And she refused to tell anyone who David was. There was no proof that they were ever together. There were no photographs of them together, no letters written, nothing to prove that she had even known this man, let alone was engaged or married to him. And the reporters were astounded that she wouldn't confirm such a basic piece of information because, you know, you love this man, you were going to marry him, or you were married to him. Which one is it, and why won't she tell us who he is? So as her story started to crumble, she began asking people at mostly at the bereavement group, not to tell anything to the reporters. And the man who had started the whole group, Mr. Bogatz, had told her he had no reason to lie and he wasn't going to lie or hide anything from reporters because, as far as he knew, there was no discrepancy on their part. You know, they weren't trying to hide anything, they weren't lying, and people were impressed with her who were at the support group because she used to open up doors for them. She would have people come in who were specialized grief counselors. She was getting money for donations. She was doing everything that she could to make their lives easier. And then the most ironic part is that she had paid for a lot of these treatment sessions out of her own pocket, which was bizarre to say the least, but she did. Um, and according to news articles, there's no proof that she made money. So there was no book deals. There were no movie deals, most certainly. Although I think that would be an epic movie. I'd watch that. I'm not gonna lie, I would. That would be crazy. But, you know, she never made any money off of this. And then when they were doing the tribute center, she wasn't paid for her time. That was more like on a volunteer basis. The people that were part of the Survivors Network were doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They weren't trying to cash in extra bucks to pocket. They were doing this because they wanted to talk about their story and to relate to people and help them understand what it was that happened, why it happened, how it felt to survive such a catastrophe. So she wasn't getting any extra bank for this, which I'm relieved for because that would have made a really horrible situation appalling. And what she did was so atrocious enough. So at least there wasn't any money made off of this scam. But eventually her story came out as a lie. So now we're looking, Tanya has been caught out there and she gets her lawyer to contact or at least to answer the news reporters and say that she has nothing to say, and she quietly left New York. And then I want to say maybe 2 years later, they received an email from an account in Spain that said that she had killed herself, but it doesn't go into the specifics of the suicide. And no one for the life of them could figure out why it is that she would do this. other than she had to be really unhappy with herself and she wanted the attention that would have come from such an experience. I don't know why anyone would want that kind of pity, that kind of attention, because I don't want any. I myself wouldn't want any notoriety for something so horrible. But this woman had such low self value that she would say anything to garner attention, even something as hideous as this. So not only did she lie to the government, she lied to her friends at the Survivors Network, she lied to newspapers all across the world. You know, she had become a very familiar face. And what really astounds me is her friends and family in Spain, they must have known that she was in New York. Why is it that they never contacted her and said, "What are you doing?" I still can't figure this out. And I mean, if they did, why didn't they out her? Like, if she hung up on them or said, "Oh, it's not your business," or whatever crazy excuse she could have given her friends and family in Spain on why it is that she was doing this. Right there, if my sister or my friend or a former colleague was doing this, I would have outed them because they need to be exposed for the frauds that they are. And I just think it's hideous what she did. And I think that's in, indisputable. Everyone would agree with that. She took advantage of people. She made people who actually did survive this or had catastrophic losses feel like their grief and their pain wasn't as powerful as hers. Because not only did she survive this thing, but she lost a loved one. How do you survive something so horrible and you still lost the love of your life? So everything that these people actually did go through, people who lost coworkers, people who lost relatives, husbands, wives, children, whatever, these people were made to feel like their pain was insignificant so that way she could have attention. There's no excuse for that. So, as far as I know, Alicia, who went by Tania Head, which sounds like a porn star name, mind you, she is still in Spain. She lied again to the network and said that she had killed herself, but as far as I know, she did not do that. And then, supposedly in September 2011, she was spotted with her mom in New York City, which takes nerve, like, to even come back, but she did. And then also in July 2012, so almost a year later, according to online, it says that she was working at Interpartner Assistance, which is an insurance company in Spain, and they found out what she did and they fired her. So even though that's not total just desserts, I do think that it's kind of funny. So she definitely deserved that. There were all sorts of things that she lied about. She said that she was working at Merrill Lynch, even though they didn't have offices in the towers at that time. She said that she went to Harvard and got a graduate business degree from Stanford. None of those schools had any record of her. And then apparently she was just in business school when the attacks had occurred. So, I mean, I'm kind of speechless. I don't know. Yeah. So that's the story of Tanya Head. There's a documentary that I really like that's called The Woman Who Wasn't There. It's on YouTube. It's free. I would watch it. It's very good. It's informative. You can actually see pictures of her. Well, I always upload pictures, but you can actually, she doesn't actually want to be interviewed in the film, so there's never any correspondence with her. But you can see photos of her. You can see the people who did survive because they do talk to them. And there's this one woman who did actually lose her fiance in the towers, and she was there delivering mail, and the whole time she was sitting there blaming herself, thinking that she wasn't likable, and that's why Tanya wouldn't talk to her. But it was really just because she had nothing to say, because she couldn't face someone who actually did have a very similar story to what Tanya was claiming she went through. So there's that. It's very disturbing. But yeah, I just wanted to cover this because she is repugnant. But anyway, I hope everyone's having a good day, and I'll catch with you guys later.